Well, it's March 25th, and today I want to kind of get into one of the topics that's been really dominating the news the last couple of days, the Boulder, Colorado attack and the resulting gun control debate, and I have a few things to kind of address about this subject. So anyhow, let's get into it. Of course, basically we have a person of Islamic descent who apparently used a Ruger, one of these Ruger pistols, a 5.56 pistol. It's basically an AR platform without the regular stock and a short barrel. And basically ended up killing 10 people, including one of them was a police officer responding to the scene. And apparently he came out with a leg wound, which is unclear to me whether that was from the police officer returning fire to him, or whether when he was massacring somebody on the ground, one of the bullets somehow missed the target, ricocheted or something. But at any rate, I digress. Okay, the point is that let's kind of get to this here. Of course, this immediately got President Biden in this whole thing about banning so-called assault weapons. And he's threatening executive action, and they're trying to pass some bill, which we can go into that quickly, what the bills are, and what might be coming afterwards. So again, if you like these videos, remember to subscribe, and you can ring the bell to be notified. Forward to anybody that's interested. I appreciate that. I got a couple of new subscribers yesterday, which I also appreciate. Let's take a look at this. First of all, the argument is that, okay, we need the H.R. 8 bill and the H.R. 1446 bill. H.R. 8 is what's called a mandatory background check. That means if you have a friend and maybe you want to sell him one of your guns, you can't just sell it to him, even though you know the person is a law-abiding citizen. I guess, who knows? I guess it could be, somebody that's totally, a government official even, I mean, somebody who has a high security clearance, whatever, it doesn't matter. You've got to go down to a gun store somewhere, an FFL, and pay for a background check to be run through with the FBI in order to make that sale and transfer of that firearm. That's what this would require. Whereas right now, in many states, not all states, you can just do that on your own volition. It's only the FFLs that have to do background checks on things they sell to the general public. Okay, now, but Colorado is different. They had other massacres there in the past. Remember Columbine, and also the big movie theater thing a few years back. Well, after that, they passed some laws. One of which was a mandatory background check law. And the other thing that's always being touted is magazine capacity limits. They touted a magazine capacity limit law after that too. So in other words, you have some pretty good gun control by the standards of what they're talking about passing already in place. And this guy just bought the thing 6 days before the crime. So in other words, what we're dealing with is we're not dealing with an super extended magazine capacity, and the guy did pass the background check. Because it turns out his only criminal involvement before was a misdemeanor assault case, I think back when he was in high school, where he apparently beat up a kid. But it wasn't a felony assault case, and therefore he obviously wasn't in the prohibited persons list that you get if you fill out a 4473 form. Okay? So in other words, it's totally legal for him to buy the gun, and now we're talking about his mental illness, but I would argue this: had he ever been to a psychiatrist or any kind of mental health professional? Had he ever been formally diagnosed? I mean, everybody thought the guy was nuts. Okay. And it's pretty also clear, isn't it always true that anybody that does a crazy mass shooting, after they do their evil deed, we can all come back and go, that guy was nuts. I know he did a lot of crazy things. But the thing is, how many people out there are just as nuts, just as crazy, and have the same comments be made about him that never do an attack, let alone a mass attack? They don't even kill one person. They don't even attempt to kill anybody. Maybe they get in a few fights or something. So what I'm saying is the idea that you're going to track down all the nutty people and keep them from buying guns with a background check system is futile. I mean, that's ridiculous. Besides that, probably if he was determined to commit a mass murder, he could probably illegally obtain a firearm anyhow. Which, interesting enough, in most mass shootings are not the case. Almost all mass shooters have never committed a prohibitive offense before their heinous deed, and they almost all pass the background check. And so the point is that H.R. 8, which is coming into consideration in the Senate, would have done absolutely nothing that the current laws in Colorado wouldn't have done. They would not have prevented this or any of the other mass shootings, basically. One might argue that 1446 might have stopped the Dillon Roof church attack, since apparently they ran out of time and maybe didn't catch something that would have been a prohibitive offense, because I think he was under indictment or something at the time. But the point is, but on the other hand, that bill would allow the government to endlessly extend and inconvenience everybody, and with a somewhat abusive executive order-oriented administration like the current one, I don't think passing that is very good for the lawful person, let's say. Now, let's get down to the next issue, the so-called assault weapon ban, the AR-15, right? The point is, the AR-15 doesn't motivate anybody to do a mass shooting. The fact of the matter is, most of these mass shooters are not the brightest tools in the shed, right? And obviously, they simply are copycats. I mean, it's sort of like, well, you know, you pick out, the last person did this, so I'll do that. And what weapon do they use? Well, it used to be the AK-47 platform that was used quite a bit. And now that AR-15s are more available and are cheaper, I guess there's cheaper models than put on the market, now that's become the trendy thing. But my point is it necessary? Well, no. If you could, by magic, if our liberal friends out there could magically wish away every so-called assault weapon that there is out there, however they define it, and I'm talking about rifles basically, or at least rifle-calibered guns, right? If they all vanish tomorrow, would that end mass shootings? And the answer is probably no. Let's look at what at the time, before the Pulse nightclub attack, was one of the worst mass shootings in terms of casualties, and that was the Virginia Tech massacre of 2007. 32 dead, 17 wounded. And what were the weapons used? A Glock 19 9mm pistol and a Walther P22, a 22 caliber pistol. Hardly the most powerful cartridges in the world, and there was no extended magazines, nothing unusual beyond what the typical person that owns a firearm would have. And in fact, I would say, and yet the guy managed to kill 32 people and wound 17. So the point is that if all these guns that they're wanting to ban now were to disappear, it wouldn't prevent mass shootings. And as soon as the first one did it with pistols, then they'd all be doing it with pistols. In other words, these people are copycats, they're crazy, they're relatively infrequent, and they're a very small part of the total firearms murders that occur in the country anyhow. And while if 10 people are killed in one incident, we can make a big national event out of it, there's more than 10 people killed every day in street crimes, one by one. And for those families and their friends, that's just as tragic as when 10 happen at once. So I think we have to get realistic about the whole situation and realize that as long as we have any kind of gun ownership in the country, it's always possible a few psychos will do things. But we do have a Second Amendment, which I support, and I think it's impractical to disarm the entire country. But what essentially why we should oppose the ban on AR-15s or other semi-automatic magazine-fed rifles of certain characteristics is very simple. These progressives are progressive, not in the sense of going to something good, but progressive like a progressive disease. And the point is, it's one thing after another. They realize they can demonize the AR-15 because of these mass shootings, so let's ban that. But when that doesn't stop the mass shootings, then we'll have to ban something else. And so eventually they're going to go after your pistols too. All modern self-defense weapons would fall in the category that can be used in this way. And in fact, hunting rifles make interesting sniper weapons too. Your typical deer rifle is a pretty powerful sniper weapon. I mean, by the time of Vietnam, actually, they started going away from the using the Springfield rifle and the M1 derivative M1 C and D rifles, and they actually started going to often not accepting the M21 sniper rifle, but they actually started often using just Remington bolt actions with good scopes on them. And what I'm getting at is, if there's somebody out there willing to prevent mayhem, there's a lot of risk with anything. But my point is, I think if you support the Second Amendment, we shouldn't let them chip away at it. And that's why I tend to say we should oppose any kind of new assault weapon ban. And as far as the H.R. 8, it's already demonstrated it won't really do any good. Now, what should be done? Well, let's face it, my opinion is, and I think this is very obvious, that there's all kind of gun laws already. For instance, there clearly is a fair amount of trafficking of guns to criminal elements. I mean, where do all these kids in Chicago get their pistols? They're not old enough to buy one in a gun store. So they're either being obtained through burglary, or they're being bought from people that are selling it to them that were able to obtain them somehow, right? And it's also known that it's illegal for somebody under 21 to have a handgun. And if these people are out there committing street mayhem on as well, drug dealing and gang shootings and stuff like this, why are we not, when we catch these people, even if we can't tie them to a specific crime, the fact that they're armed with a handgun and under 21 out on the street there is a crime. Why are we not prosecuting these people? I mean, if we really want to cut down on the gun violence, and this would be the thing to do, and we don't have to pass any new law at all. And that's why I think that we should oppose H.R. 8, H.R. 1446, and this new, and any of these assault weapon bans that they're coming up with, because they really aren't going to solve the problem, and what they are going to do is increasingly take away the rights of the law-abiding. So that's essentially my spiel on this subject. And I just think that the fact of the matter is that an attack of the same level of deadliness in that supermarket could just as easily have been carried out with an ordinary pistol, say a Glock 19, or whatever. I mean, you don't need a rifle or any other oddball weapon. I'm just trying to say out of the norm weapon, let's call it, to do this. I mean, and the fact is, the real problem is you got psycho people doing these things, and I think the more publicity they get, does anybody seriously doubt that the shootings that occurred in Atlanta, didn't somewhat inspire this? I mean, he was probably thinking this all along. He probably has had, since he's Islamic and since he's being persecuted, probably somewhat looks up to the Islamic terrorist thing. ISIS has long called on people to do exactly what he did, was buy a weapon on the market here in the U.S. and attack something in the public. And I think that, plus his own frustrations, his own paranoia, and then when this guy went off and did this in Atlanta, probably was it probably got him into action, Notice looking at the time when he bought the gun and so forth. So anyway, that's just kind of my opinion on this. So I think we should completely push back on these gun control measures, because they really won't work, and they really are an attempt to take away our Second Amendment rights. Well, that's it for today.